All right, so I have 4 articles for you today. So, in February, the National Park Service decided to get rid of a page on Harriet Tubman because of DEI. Because let's face it, the only reason Harriet Tubman is famous is because, she's black. I mean, it's not like she did anything important like, oh, I don't know, risk her life in the Underground Railroad. No, no. She's just famous for being black or something. But anyway, in February, they removed the page. And now they finally restored it. To the article from ABC News, National Park Service restores Harriet Tubman feature on webpage after criticism over removal. All right. A National Park Service website about the Underground Railroad has been restored to its original state months after it was changed to remove abolitionist leader Harriet Tubman from the top of the page. Because obviously she was only there because she was black. It's not like she deserved to be there. What the fuck? The What is the Underground Railroad page featured a photo of and quote from Tubman as leading elements on the page, followed by text explaining the significance of the Underground Railroad in transporting enslaved people to freedom and out of the South. The page was altered to remove Tubman in early February per data from the Wayback Machine, replacing the image with a collage of Postal Service Underground Railroad commemorative stamps highlighting black-white cooperation. Now, there is no doubt that there were white people involved in the Underground Railroad. Nobody is disputing that. But to downplay somebody's importance simply because she isn't white and then claim that there was black-white cooperation without, explaining it? Yeah, that's just screaming that you just want to, say that there was cooperation, but you don't want to actually highlight any of it. The change also altered the text to market the Underground Railroad as a bridge for the divides of race, religion, sectional differences, and nationality, rather than resistance to enslavement through escape and flight. Now, again, there were definitely people of, it was black, white, Christian. Actually, it was mostly Christian. I can't imagine that there were a lot of other religions involved. Nationalities, I'm sure there were different nationalities because, it was early on and there were plenty of settlers from different countries. So I could see that. But that's not the freaking point of the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad is literally to help escaped slaves get to freedom. I am not sure why we need to gloss over that. Could you point out that there was all the people that were involved in the Underground Railroad? Absolutely. But you can do that without ignoring the whole point of the Underground Railroad. It's as if the people who did this, the Trump administration, are ashamed of the fact that slavery was a part of the country and wants to whitewash the whole damn thing. I mean, it is just so bizarre that they want to pretend that slavery never happened. I guess because if slavery never happened, then we don't then white people don't owe black people anything. They're just morally inferior or just racially inferior to white people, rather than they were held back because racism exists. That's probably the reason. Mentions of the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 were also deleted before the Restoration, along with the historical cards of enslaved peoples fighting to reach freedom and a mural of the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment, the first black regiment made up of those raised in the North. All of these elements have since been added back in their original states. Right, because white people were the only ones who ever did anything. It's black men, nah, they're too lazy and stupid to have done anything themselves. No, it's just white people throughout history. Even in a story about black people, we have to make it about white people. What the heck? I mean, can you scream that this administration is run by a bunch of racists any freaking louder? I mean, this is just stupid. How thin-skinned do you have to be to accept that some white people owned slaves and not all white people were the best things ever? It's like this administration desperately wants to not just push down black people, even though that is a big thing, but also to soothe their ego that white people are inherently superior and that no matter who you are, white people are just better. That white people are just inherently better at everything at all times. And so you don't have to worry about, as a white person, being, I don't know, white trash or whatever you want to call them. Because whoever heard of such a thing? I mean, white people are awesome, black people suck. Or something. Anyway. Because why else remove all mentions of anything not just related to slavery, but the first black regiment? I mean, I think I mentioned in a previous video that firsts were one of the things that they were purging. But that's just screaming that you can't handle that white people aren't the only ones who ever did anything. Not to mention, white women had firsts. Heck, white men have had firsts. So, obviously these dipsy doodles are convinced that the only firsts were done that were worth mentioning were done by non-white men, but that's not the case. Changes to the Underground Railroad page on the National Public Services website were made without approval from NPS leadership nor department leadership. The webpage was immediately restored to its original content, the NPS said in a Tuesday statement to ABC News. So why are we only learning about it now? The NPS is a bureau of the Department of the Interior, and two anonymous NPS employees told the Washington Post that Interior Department political appointees directed senior career officials to identify web pages to change, which were then sent to management for consideration amid the Trump administration's push against diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. However, the employees told the Washington Post that they didn't know whether the recommendations were the direct reason for any webpage removals. The removal of Harriet Tubman's image and quote from the National Park Service's Underground Railroad webpage is concerning, civil rights attorney Ben Crump posted on X, while Tubman was still scrubbed from the page. Tubman's legacy and the resistance of enslaved people must never be diminished. We must stand in the truth of our history. Exactly. I mean, is that an embarrassing time for people? For, those who have relatives who have ancestors who own slaves? I'm sure that is embarrassing that there were people who acted like this. But how is scrubbing that history going to help anything? I mean, I'm sure you've heard that people who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. Well, how is scrubbing history going to help you learn history? It's not. Bernice King, the daughter of Martin Luther King Jr., argued the removal was an attack on truth, an attempt to erase history that would help us improve society today, a refusal to be uncomfortable and engage in changing harmful policies and practices. Exactly. If you look at the history of the U.S. and specifically at slavery and think that you should feel guilty because white people owned slaves, whether your family were slave owners or not, that's a you problem. Nobody's asking you to feel guilty. People are asking you to acknowledge that that's why there are more white people who have privilege. Because most black people were held back from society for so long, and it started with slavery. Continued with the Reconstruction period, because then we had Jim Crow. So you cannot understand the history and why white people are seemingly superior to black people without understanding all the ways we screwed black people over. So, yeah. If you're uncomfortable with the history, well, yeah, you're supposed to be uncomfortable because you're not supposed to look at slavery and say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. We should have kept with that. The Washington Post investigation published on Friday pointed out these changes and others from the NPS. Its analysis of thousands of NPS web pages found several changes in language to rebrand racially charged moments in American history or remove references to slavery entirely. A page on Benjamin Franklin's views on slavery was taken down, and some mentions of prominent figures such as Thomas Stone owning enslaved people were omitted. Because nothing says we are ashamed of slavery, but at the same time we're fucking racists, then, that's what I don't get. You're ashamed of the history of slavery. But at the same time, you have no problem being fucking racist. I mean, how do you square that circle? Seriously. It's basically saying, I want to be racist. I don't want to be confronted with the horrible things that racists did. So I'm going to pretend it didn't exist. Or something. Because, like I said, how do you square that? This comes amid a larger effort from the Trump administration to purge DEI from government web pages. Last month, the Department of Defense said it mistakenly removed Jackie Robinson's Army service, as well as other content, including a page that honored the 60th anniversary of U.S. troops. How in the world did that happen? Oh, because it was a first, probably. In an effort to remove DEI from its sites. Because they decided to take shortcuts, and instead of being bothered to reach it, they decided that they were just going to do Control F, find a certain word, and delete things en masse without learning why certain people were there. Like, Jackie Robinson did military service. It happened. It was a thing. Or that slavery existed. And that black people helped other black people escape slavery. Especially if you were an escaped slave yourself. I mean, that's just beyond lazy. Or, like I said, maybe Trump really doesn't want to learn about black people, that black people did anything. I mean, this is the same guy who didn't want black people to rent his apartments because, they're black and he's racist. So I guess it wouldn't surprise me that he doesn't want to erase, that he wants to erase black people from history. But it's just, how thin-skinned do you have to be about your own accomplishments, or lack thereof, that the fact that there are non-white people and women who've done more than you would actually make you so uncomfortable that you have to try to erase them from history. I mean, do I look at certain people and said, man, that what this person did was amazing. I wish I could do something like that. But I'm not going to say, oh, this person did amazing things. I want to remove them from my memory banks and from history so nobody can learn that there was somebody better than me. Because I'm not a narcissistic man baby. Actress Viola Davis, who is set to play Tubman in an untitled HBO biopic, took to Instagram on Monday to share a comment on the situation, saying the edits were downplaying Harriet Tubman and slavery. No shit. That is being extremely generous. Forget downplaying. They were eliminating it. Really, Harriet Tubman, she wrote in the caption? Elevating this icon of American history is being diminished, erased? Man, Lord, give us strength. So, yep, that's a good place to end that article. And that is where the article ends. So, yeah, at least that was restored because of an outcry, because, there are people vastly smarter than the Trump administration. And I've mentioned this many times before. This is why I've never been a fan of filters. Because no matter how you program a filter, you have to put in keywords. And no matter what words you use, it's going to filter out stuff that should never have been filtered out. So, yeah, I've never been a fan of filters, and this is just showing why they are just incredibly comical. So, the next thing I have for you is the Project 2025 tracker. So, not technically an article, but well, because the courts are getting involved, we backtracked on how many percent accomplished is Project 2025. So now it's back down to 42% as opposed to 44%. So still not great. So we have 101 objectives done and 53 in progress. So the latest is the Commodity Futures Tracking Commission. So they reduced regulations on cryptocurrencies, which I didn't know we had regulations on crypto. I thought that was the allure of crypto, is that they didn't. I know that they were thinking of adding regulations to crypto, but I wasn't aware that they actually had. But apparently, DOJ instructed prosecutors to ease up on crypto enforcement. So, that takes care of all the objectives on the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. That was the one objective they wanted to take care of, is to stop regulating crypto, which again, I didn't know they were actually doing. Okay, so let's move on to something that's just very, very sad, but also not really surprising because of the environment we live in. GOP governor signs bill that could legalize LGBTQ plus discrimination. Because, again, in this environment, you shouldn't be surprised. Disappointing, but not surprising. During a hearing, the bill's lead author couldn't explain any real-life reasons for needing to pass it. Right, because nothing says I just have unbridled hate for a group of people than not being able to defend your own damn bill. 9 years after similar legislation ignited a firestorm of protest from business and civic leaders in Georgia, State Governor Brian Kemp, a Republican, recently signed a new bill aimed at protecting religious freedom. It's amazing how people use religion as a cudgel as a shield for their hate. I mean, if you have to hide behind religion in order to be so hateful, then I think you're doing something wrong. Modeled on the Federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act, or RFRA, of 1993, the bill's sponsors say it will prevent government agents from impeding individuals' religious rights and enforcing laws that conflict with religious expression. The Republican-led State House approved the bill in a 96-70 vote. Now, in a sane world, your religion would not be trumping laws. Laws would be trumping your religion, because if you want to, you can be as racist and as discriminatory as you want to be in church. And the organizations that your church wholly supports. I don't agree with it, but that's church and state separation for you. But no, your religion doesn't trump the government. That's just not how any of this works. And what I'd like to know is, okay, so if a Muslim had certain issues with a certain group of people, and it was his religious belief, you'd be okay with that, right? I'm kidding. Of course, the answer is no, because unless you're Christian, they don't give a shit about anybody else. Critics say, just like earlier versions, the new bill will be used to deny the civil rights of LGBTQ plus people and other minorities. They also worry the RFRA will be cited as a basis for passing anti-LGBTQ plus laws, further restricting reproductive rights, allowing business owners to discriminate at their own discretion, and controlling educational materials in schools. So basically, a dictatorship that you have to be ideologically pure. I'm sorry that you have such a hard time accepting reality, but reality is still going to exist regardless. Opponents of the RFRA include State House Representative Rowling, a Democrat, who believes that without an underlying civil rights law explicitly prohibiting discrimination, the bill will give people a license to discriminate against people or lifestyles they don't like, which is the whole point of why they want this to pass. They want to be able to be dicks to whomever they want, whenever they want. They want to be able to discriminate. Georgia doesn't have comprehensive state civil rights protections. Because at the end of the day, those who will bear the brunt of this are not those in the majority. It'll be us, people in the religious minority, says Rowling, who spoke of her own Christian faith while denouncing the bill. Hold it. What Christian faith is she a part of that she considers herself to be in a minority? Because I realize that there are Christians who look down on other Christians because they're of the wrong Christianity. So I'm really curious, what is her faith that she sees herself as the minority? I mean, it's great that she's challenging the law and all, but... Governor Kemp disagreed with Rowling's take, telling reporters, "I don't buy that. I don't think we've seen that in other states, and I think our record speaks for ourselves here in Georgia." See, this is what I mean by we shouldn't erase history, because schmucks like this don't even bother to learn it. And yeah, bad things are going to end up happening. Ask any European country how well it works when you make religion the end-all be-all of how anything is run. Doesn't end well. Georgia still remains a state where there is no place for hate. Have you told that to Marjorie Taylor Greene by any chance? And I can assure all Georgians of that today, he said at the RFRA's Friday signing ceremony. At least 29 states have similar religious freedom laws. Again, I cannot wait till someone who's non-Christian decides to try to test this religious freedom law. Because we all know that they only care about Christians, and definitely a specific brand of Christianity. Not all Christians, like Rowling suggested. Still curious what Christian faith she is. The bill recalls highly contested legislation that former Governor Nathan Deal, a Republican, vetoed in 2016 amid widespread protests and concerns from Georgia's business community that it would hurt their ability to attract employees and tourists. The Metro Atlanta Chamber once again expressed opposition to the new religious freedom legislation. Right, because there are some people in the state who actually have working brains, even if it is in their pocketbook. Even if the only reason they're on the side of good is because they know they're going to lose money, at least they're on the side of good. It sucks that it's a monetary reason as opposed to an ethical one, but at least they're on the right side, so. The bill's sponsor, Senator Ed Seltzer, a Republican, of course, said the new bill, designed in part by Governor Kemp's staff, is less extreme than the 2016 version. Oh, goody. Pro-business lawmakers took pains to distinguish to distinguish this year's bill from previous efforts, saying the new law would not override local civil rights protections in place in several Georgia municipalities. Every Georgian should be free to exercise their faith without unfair federal, state, and local government intrusions, Seltzer said at a news conference last week. He said the bill protects ordinary people from unfair state and local government intrusion. Did you just invent the First Amendment? Because that's literally the First Amendment. This is not a license of private citizens to discriminate against private citizens, said Republican Representative Tyler Paul Smith, who presented the bill in the House. This prohibits the government from burning religious exercise in our state. Again, that's the fucking First Amendment. I don't know if Georgia has that type of a law. I do not know. I do not care. Because federal law supersedes state law. So even if they didn't have such a law, they still are protected by the First Amendment. Why are we doing this? Jesus Christ. Is there nothing more important in Georgia? Republican State Representative Deborah Silcox failed in her effort to add an anti-discrimination clause to the bill before it passed the House on Wednesday. She was one of 2 House Republicans to vote against it. So it's nice to know that not all Republicans are, so enamored with religion that they just don't think things through. Like, oh, there's a First Amendment in the U.S. Constitution. We do not need to do this. Examples of unfair state and local government intrusion were absent, however, in testimony about the legislation. Right, because this legislation is desperately looking for a problem to solve. Pressed during a House Judiciary Committee meeting, Seltzer couldn't name a case where someone's religious liberties were violated in a way that would require the bill's protections. Exactly, because again, we have the First Amendment. We do not need this. This is just religious fanatics who are bent out of shape that discrimination laws exist and that they can't, insult black people by calling them a slur or anybody else calling them a slur. I honestly have no idea at this point what they're whining about. We are swatting at imaginary flies and I'm sick of it, Atlanta State Representative Stacey Evans, a Democrat, said last Wednesday after the state House vote approving the bill. All right, so yeah, that's just great. Like I said, First Amendment, we have it. So the only people who need to have extra protections for religion are those who are butthurt that people who don't agree with their views call them on it and are willing to mention discrimination, because obviously, my religious beliefs should trump your discomfort or your convenience or something. Speaking of people who have a persecution complex and need to make themselves heard, J.K. Rowling decides to mock asexual people because apparently attacking trans people isn't enough for her anymore. Now she has to go after asexual people. So if the rumor is true that she's attacking trans people because her husband left her for a trans woman, what is her reasoning for hating asexual people? This is just even more stupid. Not that attacking trans people wasn't stupid, but apparently she has a reason to hate trans people because one trans woman stole her husband, which makes perfect sense, but what's her reasoning to hate asexual people? Maybe this article will tell us. J.K. Rowling cruelly mocks asexual people for no reason. Oh, great! She doesn't have a reason to hate us. That makes me feel so much better. She doubled down on her bigotry with multiple follow-up comments. This woman seriously needs to get off the computer and touch grass. My God. Viciously anti-trans author J.K. Rowling has begun extending her hate to more marginalized groups. On April 6th, seemingly unprovoked, she cruelly mocked International Asexuality Day, writing on X, yeah, it's a bit of a provocation. Happy International Fake Oppression Day to everyone who wants complete strangers to know they don't fancy a shag. Okay. There is so much wrong with that statement. First off, Fake Oppression Day? Now, I'm not one of those asexuals who are oppressed. Do I get really, really dumbass comments? Absolutely. Have I actually been discriminated against because I'm asexual? Not that I'm aware of. But there are asexuals who are oppressed. So I'm not going to deny their experience. And J.K. fucking Rowling shouldn't either. Why? Because she doesn't know how anything works. She is in her ivory tower, enjoying her riches, and being a miserable hag. And so, because she's miserable, she has to lash out at everybody who isn't seemingly miserable. Like trans people being happily living their lives as trans people. Or, in this case, asexuals who, are living their lives and expressing frustrations for, having issues because they're asexual. So there are people who have oppression, but that isn't the only reason for Asexuality Visibility Day. It is also just to let people know we exist. It's an orientation. We do not need to just find the right person because there are plenty of romantic asexuals out there. I personally am aromantic. I am not going to find that Mr. Right or Miss Right or whatever because I'm just not attracted to people. That is not how this works. This isn't about me just being super picky or not finding the right person. I'm not interested. I look at people like I look at artwork. I like some, don't like others. That's it. That's the extent of my attraction, aesthetic. Totally the extent of it. So there's that. Now, complete strangers who to know they don't fancy a shag. Again, that is not what it means. Asexuals do possess a libido. Not all of them. I possess a libido, and it is so annoying that you have a libido and you just have to grin and bear it because you don't want to deal with anybody else. So that's annoying. I wish I did not have a libido. And now that I'm probably, if I'm not menopausal, I'm very, very close. So hopefully that will just, actually, I think it has gotten better. So that's a point for menopause. So no, no, it's true that I do not fancy a shag, but there are plenty of people who do, who have libidos and actually act upon it because they're romantic asexuals, so they have sex with their partners. And again, we have libidos. Not all, but we do. So no, you can't assume that an asexual person isn't having sex. That is literally not what the word means. That's like saying all heterosexuals have heterosexual sex. Not all heterosexuals have sex. And for whatever reason, I mean, maybe they're too young, or maybe they are celibate because of trauma, or maybe because they want to join the priesthood, or they want to go to a nunnery, or to a convent, or a monastery, whatever. There are reasons why straight people do not have sex. And maybe, you know, they just, but without being asexual, because they just, they just don't want it for personal reasons. And nobody goes after them for that. Well, actually, some people do, because obviously everyone is supposed to procreate. So there are straight people who abstain. There are gay people who abstain for whatever reason, whether they happen to live in a area where they don't want to have sex with women, but it's too dangerous to have sex with a man. So there are reasons why other people other than asexuals don't fancy a shag. And it's not, has nothing to do with being with not being attracted to people. It just means that they are abstaining for a certain reason. Whether it's lifelong or just a stretch of time, they choose to abstain. Anyway, she doubled down on her bigotry in the replies. Oh, goody. Where she continued to mock asexual people and engage with followers who agreed with her. I'm afraid to find out what the heck. I want an international board of this shit day, she wrote to one person who was angry that everything has its own day now. Okay. So you're going to have a shit fit over National Dairy Month? Or, let's see, National Empanada Day, which I think is today. Or what else? National Hug a Doctor Day, Hug a Librarian Day. I think those are both separate days. I mean, yes, everything has a day. But I don't hear you crying that there's a National Empanada Day. I don't hear you crying that there is a day to acknowledge certain diseases. I don't hear anything like that except when it comes to non-straight people. then people lose their fucking minds. Or cis people, for that matter. All right. Where am I? And in response to a gay man who asked why straight people not wanting to get laid has anything to do with him, Rowling wrote, sure, people are still killed for being gay in a lot of countries, but straight people who don't fancy a quickie are being literally ignored to death, John. Is that what you want? Okay, asexuals are not straight. They may be heteroromantic, but they are not straight because they are asexual. Heterosexual implies sexual attraction. If you are straight but asexual, then you are heteroromantic, asexual. That is how that works. We are not straight people. Number one, there are asexuals who are homoromantic, which last I checked does not make them straight. So obviously heteroromantic are not straight. Now, could they be straight presenting because they are heteroromantic? Absolutely. But that does not change the fact that they are asexual. Do they have sex? Yes. And some, it's more of a chore than for others. But yes, they do. And then there are people like me who are aromantic. So we are not straight at all because we are not interested in straight sex any more than we're interested in gay sex. We are not interested in sex. We are not interested in romance. We want to be left the fuck alone. And I just don't understand why this is so hard for people to understand. I once asked the question if asexuals belong in the LGBT community, and most people did agree that we belonged, but there were a couple of people who were just as ignorant as this dumb fuck. Now, I remember asking a friend of mine from India about asexuality. Now, basically, I said, well, what if you don't want to get married? Especially since if you're a woman. What if I were in India and I didn't want to get married? It's like, well, that's just too bad. You have to. So, no, we're not being ignored to death. We are dealing with people who live in countries where it is considered not just odd that a person is not interested in getting married and popping out kids, but that is actively bad, that there is something wrong with you, and the best way to deal with that is to force you into a relationship. You have to choose someone, or in the case of India, they'll choose someone for you. So, no, it's not a matter of being ignored to death. If we were being ignored, then why are you tweeting about us, J.K. Rowling? If either we're being ignored or we're not. You can't make a thread about hating asexuals and then claim that they're being ignored to death. That is just stupid. That is like someone who takes a moment out of their time to read a post and then say, nobody cares. Well, you obviously cared enough to take a minute out of your day to write that comment. So that's a very strange way to show you don't care. Same thing here. We are if we're being ignored to death, then why are you tweeting about us? It's just stupid. All right. Others slammed Rowling in the replies for spending her time bullying others. Good. Why is it necessary to behave this way? One person wrote. How does this harm you? How does these people existing and their no way official day offend you? X is a magnifying glass that increasingly shows everyone what sort of people we are. Is this who you want to be? A person who goes out of her way to use her widely heard voice to just cast scathing aspiration and unearned animosity at people for no particular reason? What's the point of this? Wrote another. Why do you feel the need to attack people and shame them? Another person pointed out that, like other LGBTQ plus people, asexual people are also often forced or pressured into conversion therapy. They added, it can be incredibly isolating not to feel what the vast majority of people do. I mean, just think about how much romance and sex is shoved down our throats, and imagine how hard it is for people who don't have those feelings. It can be extremely difficult. Just like being different is always difficult. Please research these topics before you start insulting people. Exactly. I mean, I've mentioned this many times before on this channel, but I would have loved if during sex ed in high school there was a unit on asexuals. Because I went through high school and a lot of college feeling really weird for not being interested in dating. I mean, I didn't even recognize when there were couples around me. Until it became painfully obvious because they actually, said something that made it pretty obvious. But I never discovered that. And people looked at me like, how did you not know? Because I'm fucking asexual, that's why. But at the time, I didn't know the word. I would have loved to have known about asexuality when I was in high school and college. I didn't learn about the word until I was, I think, in my 30s. I would have loved to have learned about that. I mean, I was weird in so many ways. At least this would have made it one less case of feeling weird. So, yeah, it is difficult to be different. Because, especially when you don't understand why. It just would have been easier because it's easier to know that there are other people who have certain feelings, or in this case don't have feelings, because then you can feel like, okay, I'm not the only one in the fucking world who feel like this. I mean, there were people in my class who tried to smooth things over when I was crying I didn't have a boyfriend. And they're like, a boyfriend is more trouble than it's worth. Which I'm like, yeah, but you have one. So, how is this helpful? So, yeah. And yes, I have heard of people who maybe not conversion therapy, but corrective rape. Because, I mean, I followed this asexual activist, Swank Ivy, on YouTube. And she would talk about stories about attempting to date, attempting to be normal. And how there would be guys who would be trying to fix her. And she just finally accepted who she is at that point. And she was actually very understanding. She was calling herself non-sexual. So it's not like she had low self-esteem like I did. And yet she was she still felt pressure to try it. Because for some reason, asexuals are the only ones who get told, well, how do you know you don't like sex if you don't try it? As if that's what asexuality means. That does not mean that we do not like sex. I wouldn't know. I've never tried it. I'm not saying I wouldn't like sex. I'm saying I don't see the need to have sex with someone I'm not attracted to. Which you would think that most people would understand, but apparently, if that includes the entire humanity, apparently then that they go into wanting you to have sex with someone even if you're not attracted to them, because people are weird. Anyway, so a 2018 UK government survey found asexual people were the most likely group to be offered conversion therapy, and just as likely as gay people to experience it, Scientific American reported. In a recent interview with LGBTQ Nation, asexual activist Yasmin Benoit addressed why people don't want to accept that asexual people face discrimination. A lot of the conversations about asexuality are still kind of stuck on Asexuality 101, Benoit said. We've been having the same kind of basic awareness folding conversations for decades now. We're still having to educate the queer community and even outside the queer community about what asexuality means. They're still wrapping their head around asexuality existing, let alone the concept of asexual discrimination. Before you even start to talk about something as complicated as like the polarization, we have to move past the basic place with conversation. So, I didn't read that interview, but basically there are people whose minds stop working at I'm not sexually attracted to anybody. And because sexual people are the ones we're having this conversation with, whether it be gay or straight or pan or whatever, there are some people who just can't wrap their brains around the fact that we do not experience sexual attraction. So we have to start off basically with the point of, okay, so I take it you're straight. If it's a friend, okay, you're straight. It is like you look at someone of the same sex. You're not sexually attracted to them, so you probably wouldn't want to have sex with them. It's like that for us, but with literally everybody. So when you have to always start with that and then explain how just the fact that we have to explain that to you, and there are people who just can't wrap their brains around that, there are people who are going to try to fix us. How is that not discrimination? How is that not oppression? Jesus Christ. Okay. So that is the end of that article. So I believe I have covered everything I wanted to in this video. And being that the last topic was asexuality, if you have any questions for me about, anything I discussed, but especially asexuality, because I don't do many of those types of videos on this channel, let me know. I'm pretty much an open book. So, unlike now, obviously, in most conversations, you don't want to ask personal questions like, do you masturbate? Do you do this? Do you do that? I, however, like I said, am an open book. So, you can get personal with me. If it's something I do not want to answer, I will let you know. That's perfectly fine. So, with that, I will see you guys in the next video.